I woke up to the sound of raised voices and a door slamming downstairs. The clock on my nightstand read exactly 6:00 a.m., that cruel hour where it's too early to start the day, but too late to roll over and pretend I can sleep through it. My joints ached with that familiar biting stiffness, the kind that made every morning feel like I was waking up inside someone else's crumbling body. I sat up slowly, careful not to let the creaking in my bones drown out the noise from below. My daughter's voice, sharp, impatient, cut through the house like a blade. "Mom, are you awake? I need you to take the kids to school. I have a meeting in 40 minutes and sales messed up the whole pitch again." Of course. Meredith was late. Again. And somehow it was always me who had to pick up the pieces of her perfectly chaotic life. "Coming, sweetheart," I called back, trying to keep my voice light, cheerful, useful. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face. The mirror offered no comfort. A pale woman stared back, wrinkled, grey-haired, with eyes that hadn't shined in a long time. I was 62, but I felt older, worn thin by years of silent service. I used to dream of seeing the world photographing distant lands and unfamiliar faces. Those dreams had been packed away, traded for diapers, dinner plates, and eventually, invisibility. I took a painkiller and dressed in the same practical clothes Meredith bought me 2 Christmases ago. No frills, nothing that suggested a personality. In her house, there was no room for anything that didn't serve a function. Downstairs, the kitchen was its usual mess. Lily 10 and Joshua 8 sat at the table, glued to their tablets. Their cereal had long gone soggy in warm milk. "Good morning, darlings," I said, kissing the tops of their heads. "Where's your mom?" I asked. In her room, Joshua mumbled without looking up, yelling on the phone again. I nodded, already feeling the exhaustion set in. Meredith swept into the kitchen like a hurricane, all heels and designer perfume. Impeccable as always, and annoyed as always. "Mom, will you take them?" She snapped, eyes glued to her phone. "I have to fix everything again." "Of course," I said gently. "Just Meredith, I'm not feeling well today. My joints, my head, I think." "Oh God," she groaned, rolling her eyes. "Do you ever not have something wrong with you? Your back, your hip, your heart. Honestly, can't you go one day without complaining?" "I wasn't complaining," I whispered. She ignored me, barking orders at the children who ran to get their backpacks. I stood there, shrinking inside myself. It's been 3 years since my husband Howard died. After his funeral, Meredith insisted I move in with her, said a woman my age shouldn't live alone. I sold the house Howard and I shared for 35 years. I used the proceeds to help Meredith buy this one. A bigger one, a better one. I live upstairs in what she calls the guest room. There are no other guests. Just me, the cook, the chauffeur, the free nanny, the woman who used to be her mother. That morning, something inside me shifted, just a tremor, a crack in the cement that had been poured over my life. "Meredith," I said as the kids dashed out the door. "I think it's time we talked about my situation. Maybe I could get a job, save up, look for a small place of my own." She laughed, not kindly. "A job at your age with your... What, you don't even have a profession, Mom. Be realistic." Her words hit harder than they should have. But what hurt more was that she believed them. "You could be grateful," she added, voice turning bitter. "We give you a roof, food, clothes. A lot of people would be thankful. But no, you always have to bring up your health or your needs. You don't even realize how lucky you are." I felt the heat rise in my throat. I turned away before the tears could fall. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should be grateful. But why did gratitude feel like captivity? I dropped the kids off at school and came back to clean cook, fold, fix. I was running on fever and fumes, but no one noticed. By evening, I could barely stand. My head pounded, my body burned. I lay down, whispering a prayer that rest might help. But rest never came. At 8 p.m., Meredith stood at my door. "Mom, the kids said you've been acting strange." "I think I'm sick," I whispered. "I have a fever." She didn't step inside, just hovered. "I have a huge presentation in 3 days," she said, her voice tight with worry. Not for me, but for herself. "I can't get sick, and neither can the kids." I took medicine. "You need to leave," she said suddenly. "What?" "Temporarily, until you get better." "Where would I go?" I asked, stunned. "This is my only home." She folded her arms, exasperated. "I don't know. A hotel, a shelter." You can't stay here. I have no money, no one else. She sighed, walked out, then came back a few minutes later and tossed some bills on my bed. Here, $7. Enough for a bus and a cup of tea. You're kicking me out. Don't be so dramatic, it's only temporary. The door slammed behind her. That was the moment I disappeared. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. I realized I wasn't a person in this house. I was a responsibility, a weight, and she was done carrying me. I packed a suitcase, one old faded thing. Took a picture of Howard, 2 books, a box of trinkets no one else wanted. My whole life in one bag. At the door, Lily asked, "Is Grandma leaving?" "Yes, but just until she gets better," Meredith lied. I bent down to hug them goodbye, but Meredith raised her hand to stop me. "You're sick." I nodded, biting back everything I wanted to scream. "I love you," I told them. "We love you too," Grandma Lily whispered. Then the door closed behind me, and the cold night welcomed me like an old friend. The air outside was colder than I expected. It bit at my cheeks sharp and bitter, like the words Meredith had hurled at me. I stood on the front porch of what had been my home for 3 years, clutching my suitcase with stiff, trembling fingers. Meredith's car keys were cold in my palm. She'd tossed them at me like an afterthought. "You can drive it to the supermarket and leave it there," she said. "I'll pick it up tomorrow." And just like that, the door slammed shut behind me, cutting me off from everything I thought I had. My daughter, my grandchildren, my history. I stood there for a moment, not quite knowing where to go. There's a strange kind of stillness that comes when you realize no one is waiting for you anywhere. No one is wondering where you'll sleep or if you've eaten. You just exist, alone, on the periphery of a world you used to belong to. I got in the car and drove to the supermarket like she asked. The streets were quiet. Millville never was a noisy town, but tonight it felt ghostly, as if the world itself had turned away from me. At the supermarket parking lot, I turned off the engine and sat in silence. The warmth from the car's heater faded quickly. I was too afraid to cry. I knew if I started, I wouldn't stop. I looked at what I had: one worn-out suitcase, a photograph of Howard, and $7 in my coat pocket. My entire life distilled into less than a gallon of gas and a frayed memory of who I used to be. I thought of calling someone, but who my sisters had passed, my friends had drifted away over the years. Living in Meredith's world meant playing by her rules. No guests, no phone calls, no reminders of a life before her house and her dominance. Even my church friends had stopped calling. I had quietly disappeared long before tonight. I picked up the suitcase, stepped out of the car, and locked it with a shaky hand. As I stood under the parking lot, lights, my eyes wandered to the sidewalk ahead. In the distance, flickering neon signs danced above closed storefronts. The only place still open was a modest cafe with a faded wooden sign that read "Uneunice's Coffee Shop." Something about it pulled me forward. Maybe it was the warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Maybe it was the fogged windows that promised warmth and something that felt almost like safety. Or maybe I just needed to be anywhere but alone. The bell above the cafe door jingled as I stepped inside. It smelled of cinnamon and brewed coffee and old books, an odd but comforting combination. There were only 2 people seated at the back, whispering softly over mugs. Behind the counter stood a woman, maybe around my age, with fiery red hair, twisted up in a messy bun, and a name tag that simply read, "Ununice." She looked up and smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that sees you. "Evening," she said warmly. "What can I get for you?" I set down my suitcase beside the stool at the counter and managed a weary smile. "A cup of tea, please. The hottest you've got." "You got it." She turned to fill the kettle. "Rough night." You could say that I answered. She didn't ask more. I was grateful for that. I didn't have the energy to explain the kind of heartbreak that doesn't show up in news headlines or divorce papers, the kind where your own child tells you you're no longer needed. She set the tea in front of me. $2.50. I reached into my pocket and handed over 5 of my 7 precious dollars. She gave me 2 singles and some coins in return. I tucked them away, feeling the sharp sting of how little I now possessed. As I stirred the tea, my eyes fell on a small stand next to the register, a display of brightly colored lottery tickets. Howard used to joke about them. There's a better chance of being bitten by a shark in your bathtub, he'd say. I never played, not once, but tonight, what did I have to lose? Could I get one of those, I asked, pointing. Eunice raised a brow but nodded. Sure thing, that'll be 2. I handed her the last of my paper money and held the ticket like it was something fragile. Something sacred. You play often, she asked. Never, I said. First time. Well then, good luck. They say beginners have the best odds. I tucked the ticket into my coat pocket, not daring to scratch it yet. I didn't need another disappointment tonight. The tea warmed me from the inside. My hand stopped shaking, and for the first time in hours, my heart didn't feel like it was about to cave in on itself. Eunice continued wiping down the counter, humming something old and familiar. Her movements were methodical grounding. She didn't pry. She didn't ask why a woman with silver hair, feverish cheeks, and a suitcase had walked into her shop at nearly 10 p.m. Maybe she didn't need to. When she was done, she returned to the counter and said, I close up in about 20 minutes. You got somewhere to go. I stared at my mug. Not really. She looked at me for a long moment. I've got a room upstairs. Used to belong to my daughter. She's gone now. If you need a place to rest just for the night, I can make up the bed. I blinked. Why would you offer that to a stranger? Eunice shrugged. Because once a stranger did the same for me. And because you remind me of my mama. She wouldn't forgive me if I let a woman her age sleep outside in this cold. I didn't know what to say. No one had offered me kindness like that in years, not without a price. I can help around the cafe, I said quickly. I'm a good cook. I don't want charity. We'll talk about that tomorrow, she said with a soft smile. Tonight, you just need to sleep. Tears stung my eyes again. But this time, they weren't from grief. They were from the shocking sensation of being seen. She handed me a small key. Come on, let me show you the way. I followed her up a narrow staircase at the back of the cafe, each step, feeling like a break from the life I had just left behind. The apartment was old but clean, lived in like a memory. She showed me a bedroom with a single bed, a dresser, and a soft lamp. I sat down, suitcase beside me. This wasn't home, not yet, but it was shelter. It was quiet. It was mine for now. And maybe it was the first stop on a road I didn't even know I was allowed to take. That night, I slept like a stone dropped in deep water, sinking fast into a silence I hadn't felt in years. No one knocking on my door demanding breakfast. No angry voice calling my name from downstairs. No alarms. No responsibilities, not my own. When I woke, the light filtering through the small bedroom window was soft and golden. A slice of sun fell across the quilted blanket covering me, and for a moment, I thought I was back in my old home with Howard, before the house was sold, before the sickness, before the unspoken agreements that turned love into obligation. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. Downstairs, I could hear the quiet sounds of life cups clinking, a radio murmuring old jazz and someone humming. Probably Eunice. I sat up slowly, my joints still stiff but not screaming. The fever had broken. My body was still heavy, but I wasn't drowning anymore. And for the first time in so long, I wasn't afraid to begin the day. I found a small mirror above the dresser and caught my reflection. My grey hair was wild, my skin pale, but the woman staring back looked softened, less like someone's servant and more like someone trying to find herself again. I padded downstairs, quietly, suitcase still in the room. The cafe was open. Early light spilled across the hardwood floor. A few customers sat near the windows, sipping coffee and flipping through newspapers. It was warm, cozy, like the world had wrapped me in a wool sweater. Eunice glanced up from the counter and smiled wide. Morning, stranger. You look human again. I laughed. A real laugh. Short-cracked, but mine. I feel better, I said. Your tea worked wonders. Told you. My grandma's recipe cures everything but a broken heart. And even then, it buys you time. She poured me a cup of coffee, without asking, and slid a plate of toast across the counter. Eat, she said. Then we'll talk. I sat down and took it all in. The cafe. The comfort. The miracle of waking up somewhere I wasn't expected to clean fold or apologize. As I ate, my eyes drifted to the corner shelf near the register, the same spot where I'd bought the lottery ticket the night before. I remembered the feel of it in my hand. It was still in my coat pocket, untouched. "Did you check the numbers?" Eunice asked, like she'd read my thoughts. "Not yet," I admitted. Didn't have the heart for another disappointment. She chuckled. "Maybe it's not a disappointment, you never know." I reached into my coat and pulled out the small slip of paper. The silver coating gleamed under the cafe lights. I scratched it with the edge of a coin from my change, my fingers trembling not from hope, but the fear of foolishness. 3 numbers appeared, 800, 800, 800. 3 of the same. I stared at it, blinking. "I think I won something," I whispered. Eunice took the ticket from me and tilted it toward the light. Her eyebrows lifted. 3/8, she said. "That's the grand prize. $800,000. I laughed, but it came out strangled, unsure. $800, you mean? No, honey. She placed the ticket carefully on the counter. You won 800,000. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My knees weakened. My fingers went numb. Eunice rounded the counter and guided me into a nearby chair. Deep breaths. "Here, drink your coffee." My mouth was dry. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. "This can't be real," I murmured. "I mean, yesterday I was. And now." "Sometimes life doesn't make sense," she said. "But I've seen enough to know miracles still happen." My hand shook as I picked up the ticket again. 800,000. $800,000. I could rent a home, buy clothes that weren't leftovers, go to the doctor, fix my knees, sleep in peace. I could become someone again. Eunice knelt beside me. "You need to be careful," she said gently. "Don't go telling the world just yet. You'll have cousins you've never met showing up with business plans and sob stories." I nodded slowly, trying to absorb what was happening. "Let's just keep it between us," I said, "for now." She grinned. Smart woman. The rest of the day passed in a daze. I helped around the cafe, wiping down tables, brewing coffee, slicing muffins. It was work, yes, but it didn't feel like a chore. I wasn't doing it out of obligation. I was participating. I was part of something. At lunch, I sat by the front window and watched people walking by. My eyes landed on a young woman dragging a toddler by the hand, arguing on the phone. A teenage boy skateboarded past music blaring from his headphones. An elderly man in a tweed cap stood at the bus stop, gripping a cane. They were all living stories I'd never know. And for once, I didn't envy them, because for the first time in a very long while, I had a story of my own to write. I looked down at my hands, still shaking, still stiff, but they were mine, and they were not done yet. Later that afternoon, I sat with Eunice in the back office. She made me chamomile tea this time, and we talked about what to do next. She offered to call her nephew Nash. He worked at a bank and could help me handle the winnings when they were verified. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "He'll come by after his shift." I nodded. "Thank you." "You know," she said, leaning back in her chair, "I believe some people come into our lives at the exact moment we need them most. Maybe I'm the one who needed you," I said. Maybe she smiled. "But something tells me this is your beginning, not your ending." I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of fear, but something else, possibility. It buzzed beneath my skin, unfamiliar and electric. I laid the ticket on the nightstand next to my picture of Howard. "You were right, my love," I whispered. "I was too kind. But maybe kindness wasn't the problem. Maybe forgetting myself was." Outside, the stars blinked gently through the window, and I closed my eyes with one final thought: tomorrow. I begin again. I woke to stillness, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely, just calm. The kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. The clock on the wall read 7:58. A soft breeze wafted through the slightly cracked window, carrying the scent of warm pastries and brewing coffee from the cafe below. For a moment, I just lay there breathing it in. I hadn't slept this well since... I couldn't remember when. Maybe not since before Howard died. Maybe not since Meredith was a child and used to crawl into bed beside me after a nightmare, whispering that she'd never leave me. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. On the nightstand, the lottery ticket still lay there, neat and untouched since last night's shock. I reached for it again, as if afraid it had changed in the night, afraid the dream would dissolve with the daylight. But there it was, 800, 800, 800. It looked so simple, so small, and yet it held the power to rewrite my life. I showered slowly, letting the warm water soothe my tired joints. As I dressed in the same practical clothes, still the only ones I owned, I made a mental list of everything I would finally do. See a real doctor about my arthritis, buy a decent coat, maybe even take a short trip, somewhere with light and sea and quiet. Downstairs, Eunice greeted me with that same warm smile. Well, well. The millionaire emerges. I chuckled, sliding onto my usual stool at the counter. Not quite yet. She poured me a cup of dark roast. You ready for today? I nodded, as ready as I'll ever be. True to her word, her nephew Nash arrived just after 9. He was in his early 30s with kind eyes and a calm professional demeanor. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a respectful nod. Nothing flashy, no patronizing tone. I hear you've had a lucky streak, he said. You could say that. We sat at a back table while he walked me through the process, how we'd verify the ticket, the forms I'd need to fill out the timeline for the funds to be released. After taxes, he said, you're looking at roughly $560,000, $500,000. I had to repeat it in my mind twice before it sank in. I'll help you set up accounts, he said. We'll spread it, some for savings, some for investments, some for you to use right away. It's important to stay smart. People can change around money. He didn't say it with judgment, just realism. But the words made me think immediately of Meredith. She didn't know yet, but she would. I nodded. Thank you, Nash. I appreciate the help. Later that afternoon, I returned to the small bedroom upstairs and lay on the bed ticket, still clutched in hand. I didn't feel giddy. I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt free and terrified, because now I had no more excuses, no more ceilings, no more someone else's rules. My life was mine again. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Just words at first, then ideas. Buy new clothes, get glasses updated, find a small place to live. My place. Photography classes, Italy. Someday. The word Italy felt dangerous to write. Too beautiful. Too out of reach. But still, I circled it. And next to it I wrote, why not? In the quiet dark, I reached into my suitcase for a photo of Howard and set it on the nightstand beside the lottery ticket. You always said I was too soft, I whispered. But softness isn't weakness. And look, I'm still here. I don't know if I expected an answer, a feeling, a sign. But all I heard was the ticking of the small wall clock, marking the seconds of a life I was no longer willing to waste. The next morning, Nash picked me up and we drove to the lottery office. I was shaky. He told me that was normal. Inside the room was bright and clinical desks, forms, buzzing lights. It felt more like a DMV than the place where lives changed. But after checking and rechecking, scanning my ID, verifying the numbers, it was official. I was a winner. A representative explained the payout timeline, the tax forms, the next steps. Nash handled most of the details, while I sat there feeling like an imposter in my own skin. I'd spent so many years budgeting every dime, clipping coupons, sacrificing my own medication to make sure Meredith's kids had snacks for school. And now, $500,000. As we left, the receptionist said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Wampler. Your life's about to change." I smiled politely, but didn't answer. My life had already changed, not because of money, but because of that night on the porch when my daughter turned me into a stranger. Because of the moment I had nothing and discovered I was still someone. Back at the cafe, Eunice had closed early and was waiting with 2 mugs of herbal tea. She poured me a cup and slid it toward me. So she said, "What now?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I guess I start over." Eunice nodded. "Starting over is messy, but beautiful. Just remember you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from experience." I smiled. That's a good way to put it. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun slip behind the rooftops of Millville. I felt like a balloon cut loose from the hand that had been holding it too tight for too long. Finally, I said it aloud, I want to live. Not just survive, I want to live for me. Eunice reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You just did the hardest part," she said. "What's that?" "Believing you deserve it." That evening, I wandered the streets of Millville alone, my first walk in years, without an errand list in hand, or a child on my hip. Just me, my coat buttoned up to the neck. The city felt different somehow, as if I had stepped into it wearing new eyes. Maybe I had. I passed the beauty salon Meredith used to take Lily to before holidays. I'd asked once, just once, if I could get to trim too. "We don't really have time for that, Mom," she had said, glancing at her watch, not unkindly, but dismissively, as if my grooming was an inconvenience. Now I paused in front of the window and studied the posters, graceful women with silver hair, eyes laughing, lips full of life. One of them looked almost like me, or at least who I used to be before I let myself become invisible. I made a note in my mind, a small promise, "You're not done yet." Back at the cafe, I found Eunice wiping down the counter the same way she always did, rhythmically, methodically. Her presence was like a warm blanket, no judgment, just quiet strength. "I think I need a haircut," I told her. She smiled, "Then get one." It was the simplest answer I'd heard in years. That night, I lay awake in the little room above the cafe, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not like I had been. But something inside me was shifting, reshaping, and with it came grief. Not for my losses, but for how long I had settled for so little. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed my needs, bit back, my opinions, apologized for simply being tired or old or sick. Not because I wanted to, because I thought that was love. But love shouldn't feel like vanishing. In the morning, I called a rental office. The woman on the phone sounded surprised when I said I wanted to schedule a viewing. "Will your daughter be joining you?" she asked, assuming I was a dependent. "No," I said, almost laughing. "This place is just for me." I looked at 2 units. The third one stopped me cold. It was a small apartment, but with large windows, maple floors, and a little balcony that overlooked the park. It wasn't perfect, but it was quiet, sunlit, clean, mine. I signed the lease the next day. I packed my things, my tiny suitcase, Howard's photo, the 2 books I'd reread too many times. I left a thank you note for Eunice on her kitchen table, though I promised to come by the cafe every day at least for coffee. Before I left, she hugged me. "You're not running away this time," she said. "You're walking forward." I moved in on a Tuesday. There was no fanfare, just me, the keys, and a nervous flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt since I first left home at 19. The silence inside the apartment was different than Meredith's house. There the silence felt like punishment. Here it felt like possibility. I opened the windows wide, letting the breeze fill the room. I unpacked, slowly, methodically. And then I did something strange. I danced. Just a few steps. No music. Just me twirling gently in the golden light of my own space. Later that week, I walked into the beauty salon. The stylist, a young woman named Gianna, studied my face kindly. "Most women come in wanting to cover the grey," she said. "I want to honor it," I replied. "Just shape it, give it life." She smiled. "That's the best kind of client." When she was done, I looked in the mirror and gasped, not from shock, but from recognition. The woman staring back at me had silver hair in soft, elegant waves, clear eyes, a touch of blush on her cheeks. She didn't look like someone's burden. She looked like someone's story. That same afternoon, I stopped at the community college and picked up a brochure. Photography classes. Beginner to advanced. Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I stood outside the office for a long moment, heart-pounding, unsure if I was being foolish. Then I walked in and enrolled. The next morning, I bought myself a camera. Not a fancy one, just something small and sturdy with good glass and an honest lens. I took my first photograph standing on my balcony. The trees below were beginning to blush with fall bright reds and golden yellows. I snapped the shutter and felt something unlock inside me. A voice I hadn't heard in years whispering, "You're still here." A few days later, I received a phone call from Nash. "The funds have cleared," he said. "You're officially liquid." I laughed at the term. I had been many things in life, solid, dependable, invisible, but never liquid. He helped me open a second account, an investment plan, and a small charitable trust. "You never know," I said. "Maybe someday I'll help another woman like me." After I hung up, I walked to the nearest park and sat on a bench with my camera in my lap. I watched people go by. Children laughing, old couples walking arm in arm, teenagers pretending not to care that they were being watched. I took pictures of all of it. And as I sat there, I realized something important. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't surviving. I was becoming. Not Meredith's mother, not Howard's widow, not Grandma, the babysitter, just Fidilia, a woman, a soul, a self. That night, I went home to my apartment, made myself a cup of tea, and stood by the window watching the stars. My camera rested on the counter. Howard's photos smiled at me from the bookshelf. My hair was silver. My hands were still stiff. My past still lived in the quiet corners of my memory. But I had space now, and air, and a future. Tomorrow I would return to the cafe. But tonight I stood still in the quiet and whispered to the darkness I am not a burden. I am a woman. It was just past noon on a breezy Thursday when the phone rang. I was sitting at my little kitchen table, editing photos from my walk in the park that morning. The light had been especially soft, filtered through clouds like silk draped across the sun. I'd captured a man feeding pigeons, a little girl in bright red boots jumping in a puddle, and an old woman staring at a bench as if waiting for someone who never came. I was proud of those shots, proud of the quiet, aching humanity in them, proud that I had finally given myself permission to see the world again, not through Meredith's errands or Howard's expectations, but through my own curious lens. The phone buzzed again. I glanced down and froze. Meredith. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the decline button. My breath stilled. I hadn't heard her voice since the night she tossed $7 on my bed and told me to leave. But I knew why she was calling now. The story about the lottery win had hit the local newspaper that morning. I hadn't planned to tell anyone, but the lottery office asked for a statement, and somehow a reporter found my name. Mrs. Fidilia Wampler wins $800,000. A miracle, she says. I'd barely finished reading the article when the first text from an old acquaintance came in. Is it really you? And now Meredith. The phone kept ringing. Finally, I answered. Hello, I said quietly. There was a pause. Then that too-sweet voice I knew so well. Mom, she said, is that really you? Yes, Meredith. Oh, thank God. We've been so worried about you. Her voice dipped into concern wrapped in sugar and artificial guilt. Lily and Josh have been asking when you're coming back. I didn't know how to explain everything. But then I saw the article and, well, I just had to call. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask where I'd been sleeping or eating or living. She went straight for the headline. Yes, I said simply, it's true, I won. A longer pause now. I could almost hear her calculating. Mom, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. I said nothing. I mean, what are the odds, right? A lottery ticket. You always had the best luck. She laughed high and brittle. Look, I was thinking maybe we could meet up. Talk. Just the two of us. I closed my eyes. She wanted something. She always did. Where I asked, how about that coffee shop you like? Eunice is right, you always mentioned it. So she remembered something, or read it in the article. Tomorrow, I said, 3 o'clock. Perfect, she said. I'll bring the kids. They'll be so thrilled to see you. The line went quiet. I stared at the screen even after the call ended, heart pounding in my chest. Not from fear, but from something else. Resolve. I knew why she was coming, and it wasn't to say sorry. Later that afternoon, I walked into the cafe. Eunice was pouring coffee for an elderly couple, but when she saw my face, she raised an eyebrow and came over. She called, I said. Your daughter. I nodded. She wants to meet. Tomorrow. Eunice leaned on the counter. You ready for that? No, I admitted, but I think I need it. Not for her, for me. Want me to sit nearby? She asked gently. Pretend to read a paper, but keep an eye out. I smiled. You're an angel. That's what they tell me, she winked. The next morning I woke early. My stomach was in knots, but not from dread. From anticipation. Like something long dormant was about to be tested. Like I was standing on the edge of a bridge, with a match in one hand and a memory in the other. I dressed carefully not to impress Meredith, but to remind myself of who I was now. I wore a soft burgundy sweater, dark slacks, and the silver pendant Howard had given me for our 25th anniversary. I brushed my hair and added just a touch of lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman ready for war, but not the kind with shouting and slammed doors. The kind where truth stands its ground. At 2:45, I arrived at Eunice's cafe and took a seat in the corner booth. She brought me my usual tea without asking, and squeezed my hand once before slipping away to the counter. At exactly 3:00, the door opened. Meredith stepped inside with Lily and Joshua at her side. She looked flawless, of course. Hair, glossy makeup, perfect heels clicking confidently across the wood floor. But there was something different too, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't recognize me at first. When she did, her eyebrows lifted just a little. Not surprise, more like reassessment. The way someone recalculates a chess move when they realize their opponent isn't where they left them. "Mom," she said, approaching. "Wow, you look different." "I am," I replied. "Hello, Lily, Josh." The kids rushed to me. Lily hugged me tightly. "You look so cool, Grandma," she said. "You smell like cookies." "I missed you," Josh said more shyly, hugging my waist. My heart ached. For them I still held love. Pure, unpolluted love. We sat. The children ordered milkshakes. Meredith ordered a latte. I sipped my tea and waited. So she began. "This is nice. It's good to see you. You seem better." "I am. I've been meaning to call you," she said. "Before the article, I mean. I believe you," I said, though I didn't. A pause. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For that night. For everything." I nodded. "Thank you." Meredith leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I know things got tense between us, but maybe we could start over. Come home. The kids need you. I need you." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't just asking me to come home. She was asking me to return to the role I'd always played. Unseen, unheard, convenient. "I have a home now," I said softly. "An apartment, my own." She blinked. "Oh, that's wonderful." "It is." The children finished their milkshakes. I asked them about school, their friends, their dreams. I listened, heartful, aching but calm. And when it was time to leave, Meredith stood awkwardly by the door. "Think about it," she said. "Coming back. We can make it work." "I already am," I said, smiling gently. "Making it work." She didn't answer, but I could see the frustration in her eyes, the unraveling of her plan. Outside, the kids hugged me again. Meredith nodded once and led them away. I stood in the doorway for a long time after they were gone. Eunice came up beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. She came to reclaim the past. And I didn't go with her. I turned to her and smiled. "I didn't go anywhere. I'm already home." The next few days passed like a slow exhale. I kept returning to the booth at the cafe where Meredith and I had spoken. I wasn't replaying her words. I'd done enough of that for years. I was listening for what hadn't been said, for the space between her apology and her ask, for the cold fact that her voice only softened after she read about the money. I hadn't answered her invitation to think about coming home. I didn't need to. The silence spoke for me. But I knew my daughter. Meredith didn't accept silence as an answer. She interpreted it as negotiation. And right on schedule, she called again. This time her tone was even warmer, softer. She talked about the kids, about how they missed me, how hard it was without my help around the house. She didn't mention the lottery until the very end. "It must be a lot to manage," she said sweetly. "All that money. I'm sure it's overwhelming." "It's manageable," I replied. "I have help." She paused. "Well, if you ever need advice, James has a financial planner. Very experienced. We could set up a meeting." "I already have a team," I said. "Thank you, though." I could feel her smile dying over the phone. "Why don't we meet again?" she asked. "Just you and me. No kids this time. We can talk, really talk." I agreed, but only on one condition: the meeting would be at my apartment. My space, my rules. The next afternoon, at precisely 2:00, there was a knock at my door. Meredith arrived, dressed like she was going to court neutral tones, sleek heels, soft waves in her hair. She looked beautiful, as always, controlled, curated. She stepped inside, and for the first time, I didn't feel small in her presence. She glanced around the apartment, trying to hide her surprise. Her eyes paused on the canvas photo of a lake sunrise I'd taken myself framed above the couch. "You've really made it cozy," she said. "It's mine," I answered simply. "Would you like tea or coffee?" She shook her head. "No, thank you. I won't stay long." She sat on the edge of the armchair, like someone prepared for a negotiation. Her purse stayed in her lap unopened. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about everything that happened, about what I said." "I'm listening," I said. She smiled faintly, smoothing her hands over her knees. I overreacted that night. I panicked. I shouldn't have asked you to leave like that. You didn't ask, I corrected softly. You told me. She looked away. You were sick and the kids, Josh's asthma, my work. I understand, I said. You were scared, but so was I. Meredith shifted her tone, changing. Mom, I know we've had our differences, but now that everything's settled, now that you're okay again, maybe we can figure something out. You come home, we support each other. The kids could really use you. And you, she met my eyes. I miss having you around. I watched her carefully. Or you miss having help around. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her hands clenched around her purse strap. Look, she said, voice beginning to tremble. We're in a difficult spot right now. James's business is failing. The mortgage is bleeding us dry. We've burned through savings. This lottery, it's a gift for all of us. There it was. The truth laid bare like a bruise under gauze. You want the money, I said. No, she said quickly. I want our family to be okay. I want us to heal. You didn't want to heal when I had nothing. You wanted me gone. That was different, she snapped. Because I had no value, I asked. Because sick mothers are inconvenient, but wealthy mothers are strategic. Stop twisting this, she said, standing abruptly. You think you're above all of us now because of some lucky ticket. I stood too, calmly. No, I think I've finally stopped being beneath you. We stared at each other in silence. Do you know, I said slowly, that I would have given you everything. Not the money, me. All of me. If you'd just said you loved me, if you'd come to find me when I was sick and alone. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered just a little. But you didn't, I went on. You waited until I became useful again. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and she stepped toward the door. So that's it then, she said coolly. You're cutting off your family over a few words. No, I said gently. I'm drawing a boundary over a lifetime of erasure. Meredith shook her head, scoffing. You'll regret this. You'll die alone in this little apartment, and no one will be there to change your diapers or bring you soup. I'd rather die alone in peace than live surrounded by people who only value me when I'm convenient. She opened the door. You'll never see your grandchildren again. If that's the price for self-respect, I'll pay it, I said. And I'll hope one day they come find me when they can make that choice for themselves. She left without another word. I stood by the door for a long while after it closed. My hands shook, not from anger, but release. The silence afterward was powerful, heavy, holy. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The sky outside was pale, streaked with amber. The wind brushed through the trees like a hymn. Eunice texted me, "You okay?" I responded, "Yes, I'm finally okay." And I was. It took a few days for the tremble to leave my hands. Not from the confrontation, but from the letting go. Letting go is a quiet grief. There's no ceremony, no applause, no final scene with music rising in the background. Just you standing in the middle of your own life, finally realizing you don't owe anyone your silence anymore. But grief still came, it always does. I missed Lily and Joshua most in the mornings. I used to tie Lily's shoelaces, while humming the lullabies she no longer wanted sung at bedtime. Josh would lean into me while brushing his hair, never saying much, but always offering quiet warmth. That absence-raw, gentle echoing settled in my ribs like cold air. And yet I didn't regret my choice. I was no longer a convenience, I was a person, and with that came responsibility to myself. A week after Meredith left my apartment, I found myself walking along the edge of Millville's small lake district. It was a part of town I hadn't visited in years, tucked away from the suburban sprawl. There were a few old cottages nestled near the water, their porches peeling their windows, clouded with age. I passed a for sale sign and paused. The cottage sat a little off the road, half covered in ivy, its shutters, crooked but charming. The lake shimmered just beyond the backyard, framed by tall reeds and the curve of old oak trees. It looked forgotten, and I felt seen. The next day I called Nash and asked him to come with me to look at the property. Thinking of buying, he asked, surprised. Thinking of belonging, I replied. The inside of the cottage was rough, dusty, full of spiderwebs and echoes, but the bones were strong. The living room had a stone fireplace. The kitchen opened up into a sunroom that faced the lake. Upstairs were 2 small bedrooms, one with a round window that would catch sunrise light like stained glass. It needed work, yes, but so did I. So I bought it. The The real estate agent handed me the keys with a smile that said, "Are you sure, lady?" But I was. I moved in with just my suitcase, my camera, and a stack of dreams I had no idea how to fulfill. Unice and Nash helped clean. Elliot, a quiet man I'd met in photography class, offered to repair a broken window. He didn't ask why I chose a lake house instead of a retirement condo. He just said, "Good light here, perfect for photos." I smiled. That was enough. 3 days after moving in, I did something I had wanted to do for decades. I went to the animal shelter. Howard never wanted pets. Too much hair, too much mess, too much cost. Meredith echoed the same later. No space, no time. The kids have allergies. But this time I didn't ask anyone. I walked through the rows of barking, whining cages until I came to one near the end. A golden retriever sat quietly, her head resting on her paws. Her eyes met mine, not with excitement but recognition. She didn't bark. She didn't beg. She just looked. Her name was Daisy, 7 years old. Owner had passed. No one wanted her. Too old, too slow. "Same," I whispered through the bars. When they let her into the meeting room, she walked straight to me and sat down, pressing her weight gently against my legs. No noise, just trust. I signed the papers. Daisy came home with me that night, curled up at the foot of my bed, and sighed the way someone does when they finally exhale years of being unwanted. We were two older girls finding new ground. Each morning I woke early and made tea. Daisy followed me to the dock where I sat, with my camera capturing fog, lifting from the lake light, trickling through branches, ripples forming like conversations between water and wind. I submitted 3 of those photos to a local gallery's open call. To my surprise, they chose one for their fall exhibit. They hung it in the front display window with a placard, "Resurface, by Fidilia Wampler." I stood outside the gallery that afternoon, staring at the image, a silver reflection of trees on still water, and realized something I hadn't dared believe until then. This wasn't just healing, it was becoming. Later that night, Elliot came by with takeout and a bottle of wine. Daisy greeted him with a wag of her tail. "I saw your photo," he said, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. It stopped me in my tracks. "Thank you. Have you thought about doing a full show?" he asked. I laughed. "Let me get a real dining table first." But the idea lingered. We ate on the back deck, wrapped in blankets. The stars above the lake were thick and low, like secrets waiting to be heard. "You've changed," he said. "I've returned," I whispered. And in the stillness between us, I realized something else. This cottage wasn't just a house. It was proof that I was no longer surviving Meredith's world, or Howard's silence, or society's expectations of what a woman my age should be. I was living mine. Daisy nudged my hand. I looked down and scratched her behind the ears. "You and me," I said, "we made it out." She wagged her tail once and rested her head on my lap. Tomorrow we'd wake with the light, walk the lake path, and take more photos. But tonight, under a sky that finally felt like mine, I was home. The lake glistened that morning, with a golden sheen that reminded me of childhood. That's what light can do, pull you backward and forward all at once, stretching your memories, like soft dough, wrapping them around the moment you're standing in. Daisy and I were sitting at the edge of the dock, her chin resting on my boot, my camera in my lap. A heron had landed on the opposite shore, still and statuesque, and I snapped its portrait like a gentle prayer. In my new life, there were no loud alarms, no slammed doors, no whispered resentments between hallway walls. Just light, just breath, just quiet. I had lived decades giving all of myself away piece by piece, never questioning who I might have been if I'd held just one piece back. Now, at 62, I finally had something most people didn't space. Space to listen to my own thoughts. Space to explore possibility. It was a quiet revolution. That same afternoon, the owner of the gallery where my photograph had been displayed called. "We've had a lot of people asking about your piece," she said. "Any chance you'd be interested in doing a full show?" My heart thudded in my chest. A whole exhibition. "You have a gift," she said simply, "and a voice. People can feel it." I hung up and sat in my little kitchen staring at the wall. A whole show. My name. My images. Not someone else's schedule. Not someone else's demands. Mine. I didn't cry, not out of pride, but because the emotion felt too big for tears. like my lungs couldn't stretch wide enough to hold it. I spent the next few weeks photographing everything. Old barns, fog-covered trails, elderly couples holding hands in the grocery store, children fishing on splintered docks. Each photo was a story, not just theirs, mine too. I also spent more time with Elliot. We had an ease between us, one that required no performance. He came over for dinner on Thursdays. I visited his house on Sundays for coffee and conversation about books and photography and aging and everything in between. One night we were sitting on my porch, listening to the frogs sing and watching fireflies blink like Morse code over the lake. He reached over and took my hand. "You know," he said, "for a long time I thought I'd already lived my best years, that everything worth having was behind me." I turned to look at him, and now I asked, "Now I think the best years are just less noisy and a lot more honest." I smiled. That sounded right. Later that week, Nash helped me open a new account specifically for the photography venture. We talked about budgeting, about supplies, about investments. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. "For the first time, I'm building something that doesn't belong to anyone but me." The gallery opening was set for November. I spent the weeks leading up to it curating the exhibit with care. I called it Late Light, a reference to the golden hour that photographers chase, but also to the years I thought had passed me by, only to discover they held their own quiet beauty. The opening night arrived and I wore a navy dress with a silver pendant, my hair styled soft around my face. Eunice stood beside me, radiant in a velvet shawl, proud like a sister. "You did this," she whispered. "Look around. This is your voice on the walls." And it was. People moved slowly through the gallery, pausing in front of images with hands over hearts. I heard one woman whisper, "This one makes me feel seen." That was all I had ever wanted. Midway through the night, Elliot joined me near the back wall, where my favorite photo hung a close-up of Daisy staring into the lake. Her reflection soft but clear. Her eyes focused on something invisible but certain. "You're remarkable," he said, slipping his hand into mine. "I'm becoming," I said. He smiled. "You're allowed to be remarkable too." I didn't argue, not anymore. As the gallery emptied and the lights dimmed, I sat on a bench in the center of the room and let myself feel the weight of it all. Not regret, not sadness, just gravity. The groundedness of finally owning my story. On the way home, Elliot said something I would never forget. "You know, Fidilia, maybe this isn't your second act. Maybe this is your real first act, the one you were always meant to live." And maybe he was right. That night, Daisy curled up at the foot of my bed, sighing in that way she did when she knew I was safe. I opened the window, letting the cool autumn air fill the room. Outside, the lake shimmered beneath the stars. Inside, my heart shimmered too. I was no longer just existing. I was witnessing myself, my worth, my world. And I was only getting started. I'd barely finished hanging the last photograph from my exhibit back in my home studio when I received the message from Mrs. Patterson Meredith's old neighbor. She'd always liked me, even when Meredith treated me like furniture. We'd shared a few recipes, some quiet conversations by the garden fence back in the early days, before I knew what Meredith's generosity would cost me. Her message was simple. "I don't mean to intrude, but I thought you should know. Meredith and James lost the house. He's in serious debt. They moved into a small rental outside town. She's working double shifts." I stared at the message for a long time. I read it again and again. And I felt not joy, not revenge, not even pity really, just emptiness. I set the phone down and walked out to the dock. Daisy followed close behind her paws, padding softly against the wooden boards. The sun was setting across the lake, bathing everything in orange gold light. It was beautiful. It should have felt peaceful. But something inside me was stirring. Meredith, my daughter, even after all the pain, even after the betrayal, her name still pulled at some old thread stitched into my heart. The thread that connects mother to child even when it frays. I knew I couldn't fix her. I wouldn't undo the boundaries I'd worked so hard to build. But I also knew something else I couldn't live with silence. I needed her to know one thing, if nothing else. So I texted Mrs. Patterson back. "Please let Meredith know if the children ever want to visit their grandmother, they are always welcome." It was all I could offer. No money, no invitation. Just an open door for love if they wanted it one day. Because that's the thing about being a mother. The door stays open. Even if you've locked it against pain, you leave the key in plain sight for the ones who knock gently. I sat on the dock long after the light faded. Daisy leaned her head against my knee. The night crept in quietly, and I let it. The next morning, I returned to the coffee shop needing something familiar. Eunice was behind the counter humming as she polished silverware. She looked up and saw something in my face. She's struggling, isn't she? I nodded. She wiped her hands and poured me a cup of tea without a word. She never came to the gallery, I said softly. Not a call, not a note, nothing. She doesn't know how Eunice replied. Some people don't know how to reach for healing, only power. And when that power's gone, they flail. I stared into my cup. I don't hate her. Isn't that strange? It's not strange, she said. It's strength. Later that day, I returned home and found Daisy waiting at the door. We walked down to the lakeshore, camera in hand. The wind rustled through the reeds, and I snapped a photo of nothing and everything all at once. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I printed it. I wrote on the back, Lily and Joshua, if you ever want to see where your grandma lives, this is it. Love always. Grandma Fidilia. I mailed it without fanfare. No return address, no message for Meredith. Just a breadcrumb. The next week I had lunch with Elliot at a small restaurant in town. He noticed I was quieter than usual. She's in your head again, he said. I nodded. Does it make you want to go back, he asked. No, I said immediately. Not even for a second. But I want them to heal. Even if it's not with me. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You can love someone and still choose not to let them back into your life. I met his eyes and felt something steady in my chest. I know. We finished lunch, and on the walk back to the car, he paused outside a little boutique I hadn't noticed before. In the window was a simple necklace, a pendant shaped like a small open door. You should have that, he said. Why? Because that's who you are. You don't slam the door. You just don't let people walk in with muddy feet anymore. I laughed. That's the best compliment I've ever received. He bought it for me. I wore at home the silver pendant cool against my collarbone, a symbol, a reminder. You can forgive without forgetting. You can love without inviting someone back into the house they burned. The next morning, I received a call from the art gallery. 3 of my photographs had sold. You're kind of a sensation, the owner said. People keep asking about the woman with the lake dog. I hung up and laughed out loud. Me, a sensation. At 62, who would have thought? That night, Elliot and I danced in my kitchen to an old jazz record. Daisy lay at our feet, sighing softly. You're glowing, he whispered. I'm surviving, I replied. He shook his head. No, darling, you're living. There's a difference. I pressed my cheek to his and closed my eyes. And thought, money can buy a house, but it can't buy a home. It can buy safety, but not peace. It can buy respect, but only if you already believe you deserve it. I believed it now, finally, and that made all the difference. I turned 63 just a few weeks after the last leaf fell from the oak tree in my backyard. It was a quiet morning, grey skies, a soft drizzle tapping on the window panes, but my house felt warm alive, filled with the aroma of cinnamon and cardamom. Elliot had asked me what I wanted to do to celebrate. Nothing loud, I said, just real. And real it was. Eunice brought a pie and a bouquet of wildflowers. Nash showed up with his wife and a bottle of sparkling cider. Even the woman from the gallery came gifting me a hardcover photography book and a note that read, "Thank you for proving it's never too late." We sat on my porch, bundled in blankets, laughing. Music played low from the old record player in the corner. Daisy trotted between guests, accepting crumbs and belly rubs, like she'd hosted dinner parties her whole life. When Elliot raised his glass, the hush that followed was soft reverent. To Fidilia, he said, a woman who taught us all something invaluable, that sometimes life doesn't begin until you stop living it for everyone else. I didn't expect the tears that came next. But they weren't the kind that sting. They were the kind that soothe. I looked around at the people who had walked into my life, not because they needed something from me, but because they saw me. And for the first time in decades, I felt celebrated, not for being dependable, not for being useful, but for being me. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on the edge of my bed, and took out the small wooden box I kept in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside were a few things I hadn't quite let go of yet: an old photo of Meredith when she was 10, a note Lily had once scribbled in crayon, a pressed daisy from the bouquet Elliot had brought the first time he visited the lake house. I looked at Meredith's picture for a long time. Her eyes were my eyes. Her hair had once been like mine, but her heart, I didn't know. I wanted to believe there was still softness somewhere in her, buried, protected, misguided maybe, but not evil. I didn't hate her, I couldn't, but I also knew that I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. Healing isn't pretending, it's accepting, and I had accepted something important. Some people will never love you the way you need, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve love. It just means you have to stop waiting for it from the wrong place. The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address, but the handwriting was instantly familiar. Lily. The envelope contained a photo of her and Josh in front of their new school, smiling nervously. Inside was a short note. Dear Grandma, thank you for the picture of the lake. It's beautiful. I showed it to my teacher. She says I take pictures like you now. We miss you. We think about you. Love Lily and Josh, too. I sat at the kitchen table, holding that note, letting it press into me like morning sun. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't turned cold. They were just growing up inside someone else's choices. And someday I believed they'd find their way back. Not because I chased them, but because I stayed still, true, open. I put the note on the refrigerator next to a photo of Daisy on the dock, her ears lifted in the wind. Later that day, Elliot came by, his arms full of groceries. I was thinking, he said, unloading the bags, maybe next spring we finally do that Europe trip. I smiled. Rome, Florence, Venice, and somewhere quiet in the south. Sounds like a plan, I said. Let's take our cameras and our bones and go see what's left of the world. We both laughed. That evening, I posted one of my photos to my new online gallery. It was of the lake just before sunrise, still quiet with a single ripple across the glassy surface. I captioned it, Becoming, age 63. It was the most liked photo I had ever shared. I sat on the porch that night, Daisy curled beside me, Elliot reading nearby. The wind carried a chill, but it wasn't unwelcome. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and whispered something to the sky. Howard, you were wrong, you know. I wasn't too kind. I was just kind in the wrong places. The stars blinked overhead. I smiled. I had finally found the woman inside me I thought I'd lost. Not someone's mother. Not someone's helper. Just me, Fidilia. And she was enough. More than enough. She was home. The wind was soft that morning, carrying the scent of early blooms and the distant hum of boats from the far end of the lake. Spring had crept in overnight, gently pushing winter out the back door. I opened every window in the house. I wanted the air to move freely through my lungs, through my thoughts, through the memories that no longer haunted me, but sat politely in the corners, waiting to be acknowledged. Daisy padded softly from room to room, her golden fur shimmering in the sunlight. She'd taken to napping on the braided rug in my studio while I edited photos. That morning, I was putting together the final selections for my second gallery show, Unbroken Lines. A title that felt right about the lines we trace back to ourselves, even when they've been knotted, twisted, frayed. I poured a cup of tea chamomile and lemon balm and stepped onto the porch. The lake was still. That hush before the world begins speaking again. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for attention but deserves it. Elliot had left early to meet with his publisher in town. His second novel, a historical mystery set in pre-war Italy, was in its final edits. He'd offered to dedicate it to me, but I told him to dedicate it to Daisy. We both laughed, but I knew he meant it either way. As I sipped my tea, a small shape emerged on the road, two of them. Children. I stood heart-still, breath caught. Lily and Joshua, walking slowly, hesitantly. Behind them, about 20 paces back, was Meredith. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her mouth taut, her eyes unreadable. But she didn't move forward. She stayed by the road. The children came all the way to the porch. Grandma Lily said softly, "Hi." "Hi," I whispered, voice thick. Josh smiled, small and shy. "You look different." "I feel different." They giggled. That same giggle I remembered from breakfast's bath time, bedtime stories. I saw your photo in the gallery, Lily said. My art teacher showed it to the whole class. You're famous, Josh added. I laughed. I think I'm just finally seen. They looked at me for a long moment as if seeing me for the first time, not as a grandmother but as a person. Can we come in, Lily asked. I opened the door without hesitation. Of course, I said. They stepped inside quietly. Daisy immediately wagged her tail and flopped at their feet. Daisy, Lily cried. She's so sweet. She's my best friend, I said, smiling. We sat on the floor with Daisy. I poured them lemonade. We talked about school, their new apartment books they were reading. They asked about the photos on my walls. I showed them my camera, let them take a few shots in the backyard. For a while, the years of distance fell away. Eventually, Lily turned to me. Mum said we couldn't stay long, but I just wanted you to know. I never stopped loving you, even when we didn't see you. My chest ached, but in the best way. The way sore muscles ache after healing. I never stopped loving you either, I said, and I never will. Josh took my hand and held it for a moment. No words, just warmth. Outside, Meredith hadn't moved from her place on the road. She watched, she waited. Before the kids left, Lily hugged me tight. Maybe next time we can come help you with your photos. I'd love that. I walked them down the gravel path. Meredith's eyes met mine as the kids reached her side. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say sorry. But she didn't say anything cruel either. We just stood there, two women who had once been mother and daughter, now separated by choices, time pride, pain. And something deeper, something like understanding, not forgiveness. I nodded once. She nodded back, then turned and walked away. The kids waved as they disappeared around the bend. When I returned to the porch, Daisy trotted up beside me and sat. You saw that, I asked. She wagged her tail. I exhaled long and slow and leaned into the railing. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something, a crack in the door, and that's all I ever needed it to be. Not wide open, not vulnerable, just not locked. Inside, the clock ticked on the mantel. Time didn't feel like an enemy anymore. It felt like a companion, each second a small echo of a life reclaimed. I picked up my camera and snapped a photo of the path, now empty but still warm with footprints. Later, I'd label the image. She came back briefly, but the memory would last. Because even brief returns can stitch something back together. Even soft goodbyes can feel like healing. I didn't know what the future held for Meredith and me, but I knew this: I would never again barter my worth for inclusion. I would never again silence my voice just to be tolerated. I was no longer afraid of losing people who only loved me when I was convenient, because I had found someone far more precious, myself, and I planned to keep her, always.